Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. I am your host, Ron Harrington, back today with another video. And today, we are here for the Season 2 finale of What If Tanjiro Had Venom? Demon Slayer Dark Fury, Season 2, the Entertainment District Arc, Part 2, the finale. As always, if you're a fan of the channel and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting stuff to come out now and in the future. Now, originally this was going to be a 3-part series. However, over the weekend, as I was going over the script and going through some rewrites, I was actually able to cut it down to 1. Meaning that if I was to make a 3rd video, I would basically just be stretching out the plot unnecessarily. Also, I do think this would be much more efficient since the Entertainment District arc was only 11 episodes, and in the first video of Season 2 for this series, I actually ended up covering the first 5 anyway, meaning I would only have 6 more left to cover, so it would just be easier to rewrite everything and get it done in one video, basically doing it in one shot. So that is one change that is going to be made to this series. It will only be 2 parts instead of the original 3. But anyway, I think that will be more efficient in the long run, mainly because I want to try to get through these series in a timely manner as we get towards the major crossover events and we get to the final stretch of our series of videos. But as always, I want to thank everyone who supports PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. As always, I cannot do it without you. You make the channel grow, you make the core grow. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into today's video. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. As both Tanjiro and Venom were preparing for their battle against the demon Daki, Tengen would have managed to find one of his wives, Hinatsuru, who had made it to the outskirts of the district, having poisoned herself to escape. However, she had remained unable to get into contact with him. Following his creed, Tengen would make sure to heal his wife. Once doing so, he would give her orders to leave the city, knowing the battle that was to come. He wanted her safety to be prioritized over anything else, even his own. In the meanwhile, Inosuke, while attempting to track down Zenitsu and the others, would eventually find a secret passageway under one of the homes. It was a tight squeeze to say the least. However, Inosuke's years of wilderness survival training had given him some unique abilities, one being the ability to dislocate his joints, making it so that he could fit through narrow spaces much more easily before repositioning them into place. In doing so, he made his way through the tight passage before eventually finding a cavern where it appeared that all of the victims of Daki had been absorbed into her obi sash, where they could be stored for later. Cutting through them, he was able to release those who had been imprisoned in the first place, thus saving them, and also weakening Daki's abilities in the first place, as she used the sash to move through the tight spaces underneath the city, basically allowing her to move around freely and undetected. In the process of doing so, he would engage in battle against the living fabric itself, in the process also freeing Tengen's 2 other wives, that being in Suma as well as Makio. In the process, he had also managed to find Zenitsu, who had been trapped as well. Once he was freed, Zenitsu, who remained in his sleeping state, thus allowing him to fight at his full capacity, the two of them would work to face off against the Sashes. Just in time, Tengen would arrive as well, saving them from a few other attacks. Once all the citizens were free and secure, Tengen, Zenitsu, and Inosuke would move to go and find Tanjiro as quickly as possible to help aid him in his battle, while Tengen's wives would work on getting the other citizens to safety. In the meanwhile, Tanjiro battled against Daki, the fight proving to be more even than even she would have wanted to admit. No human could ever be on her level. She had defeated many demon slayers, including many Hashira. So just how on earth was this boy able to compete with her? The answer was rather simple. Venom and Tanjiro, in all of this world's history, were probably the first pair that could have ever given the demons such a push. The simple fact of the matter was that Venom's enhancing strength, combined with learning the fighting abilities that Tanjiro had gained in his years of training, allowed for the two of them to be in sync with one another. It was getting to a point where Daki had to summon most of her Obi sash close to her, to use as much of the fabric as possible to be on the defense, using it to try to attack him from different sides, 6 in particular. However, Tanjiro was not going to be caught off guard. He would use his Venom breathing, third form, Frenzy Strike, along with the Hinokami Kagura, causing a flurry of flames to appear all around him, slashing away at all of the sashes all at once, making it almost impossible for her to get a hit. She found herself being completely overwhelmed, and it was more than what she could handle. It caused her to be fearful in that moment. However, for Tanjiro and Venom, they knew that now wasn't the time to hold back. Now was the time for them to press forward, to take the advantage. As they continued moving on, Daki became more and more fearful. It was starting to become clear to her that she was not going to be able to survive this. By the time the others had made it to where the fighting had been taking place on one of the roofs of the building, even Tengen would be shocked to see just how well Tanjiro was able to move, fighting against one of the 12 Kibutsuji. It was more than he could have ever possibly have expected from the young swordsman. This Venom, whatever it was just like Rengoku said. It gave humans the ability to fight the demon on a level that they probably wouldn't have ever had in their lifetime. And more importantly, the demons were starting to know it as well. Before Daki even had a chance, Tanjiro would move past her defenses, as he and Venom would combine for their devastating attack. Venom breathing. Second form. Long sword strike. Venom would use his symbiote, encasing it around the blade and extending the length of the sword, moving farther than even Daki had managed to anticipate. The sword would come slashing through her neck, sending her head rolling to the ground as the others stood beside them. Daki would be in shock. She couldn't have imagined that this kid, of all people, would have been able to take her head off. All the same, Tengen was impressed. If Tanjiro continued on the path he was now, then there was no telling what he could be capable of. However, Daki would continue to yell out and cry. She was upset by the fact that she had been defeated. She couldn't have believed it, nor could she have accepted it. She cried out for her brother, to come to her aid, calling out to the name of Gyutaro. Of course, no one knew what she was talking about, but that wasn't really the problem here. The problem came in the fact that she had had her head cut off by a Nichiren blade, and yet she was still alive. No one could even fully understand what was going on until suddenly a sickly-looking demon would appear. He was male, and he also had the eye of the upper six, showing that the two of them were indeed connected. As he arrived, he would help reattach Daki's head to her body, before chastising her for getting herself in such a situation. But as he was the older brother after all, it would only make sense that he would serve as her protection. It was what big brothers were supposed to do after all. As Daki and Gyutaro would now stand together once again, the two of them preparing for a fight. Tanjiro and the others would prepare as well. The two brother and sister duo looking directly upon Tanjiro, their hatred beginning to seethe upon them, knowing fully well that he was the one who had caused their master so much pain, the one of whom Muzan wanted to have killed and brought before him. Him along with his sister, the demon girl, who had not killed a single human. The four demon slayers would prepare for battle as they engaged with the brother-sister duo. Both Inosuke and Zenitsu would battle against Daki, while Tanjiro and Tengen would take the fight to Gyutaro, who would unveil his own blood demon arts. That being that he was capable of using his blood as a weapon, using them in a slashing motion that could continue to attack the target until it got results. And then, as if to make matters worse, his weapons, that being two single-handed sickles, were also coated in a poison, one of which that was not easy to ward off. As Tengen's wives helped in the evacuation of the city, once all of the civilians had been moved to safety, they would want to rush back to serve at their husband's side, as both Tengen and Tanjiro battled against the brother. Tanjiro, with the aid of Venom, strengthening his body and giving him a strong resistance, was able to take the brunt of his attacks, giving Tengen enough time to evaluate the situation. They were able to deduce that the brother and sister were actually synchronized with one another, and that the only way to defeat them was going to be to cut off both of their heads at the same time, a task that would be easier said than done. Gyutaro was not someone to be taken lightly. Being one of the upper ranks, his power and strength could be overwhelming, on par with that of Akaza, and Venom knew this. However, Tengen would be able to lead the charge in this battle, the two of them fighting together. Tanjiro was able to take pointers from his superior, as the two fought as one. In the meanwhile, Zenitsu and Inosuke would continue on fighting against Daki. Daki would find herself having a hard time fending the two off. She would look for aid from her brother, however she would not be able to receive any, only because her brother was so preoccupied fighting against the two demon slayers. However, as he fought against them, there was one thing he was able to notice, that being that between the two, in terms of defense, Tanjiro with Venom had a better chance of warding off his poison, as Venom would take the cuts instead of Tanjiro. And since Venom was basically immune to poison, it meant that Tanjiro was safe. However, Tengen was not. Even for the few brief moments that Tengen had been hit, the poison was slowly going to take effect over him, meaning that Tengen would eventually become the weak link and who Gyutaro would set his sights on. This left Tanjiro having to fight on the defensive to protect his higher-up, as well as fighting off against the demon's various attacks at all fronts. However, both he and Venom, as they continued to fight, would draw upon the experience that they had accumulated together. This would lead Venom to mentioning to Tanjiro that when it came to his fighting style, it seemed as though his sword skills worked in two different fashions. Tanjiro asked what he meant by this, and Venom would explain that when it came to the Hinokami Kagura, it was more of an offensive fighting style than anything else, and when he amplified it, his offensive power was tenfold. However, his water-breathing skill, it took more of a defensive front than anything else, and he believed that they had been using their skills the wrong way. Instead of just using both for attack or both for defense, the water should be used for defense and the fire for attack. Amplified by his venom breathing, it would give them the edge that they needed to overcome this battle. As they continued fighting on, Daki would start to get the upper hand over Zenitsu and Inosuke. Seeing the trouble that they were in, Tanjiro and Venom both knew what they needed to do. They would ask Nezuko to go and assist them, the box on Tanjiro's back opening instantly as Nezuko would go rushing out. As her body grew in size, so too would her strength. She had developed skills of her own, as she too had took into practicing, seeing just what type of power she could muster. Her raw demon strength was more than enough to help turn the tide for the two in their fight, allowing them to hold off Daki completely, while Gyutaro would have his hands full with Tanjiro and Tengen. Seeing himself in a rather desperate state, a matter only made worse when Tengen's wives would also try to lend a hand. They had specially made poisoned kunai that could help stun and harm even the demon. In doing so, it meant that Gyutaro was now in an even worse state than he could have possibly have realized. He didn't want to go this far, nor did he wish to use that technique, but it seemed as though it was going to be his best chance at victory. The brother and sister duo, now realizing the plight of their situation, would try to go in for an all-out assault. Recoiling her obi back to her side, Daki would use her demon technique, complete devastation, destroying the area around her, aided by the strength of her brother. Seeing what was about to happen, Tanjiro would try to move the others out of the way as quickly as he could, the large explosion engulfing the surrounding area, blowing and sending everyone back in different directions. Tanjiro would slowly rise back to his feet, Venom checking in on his partner and making sure that he was okay. The two, now getting in sync with one another, would look around to see that the entire area had been devastated. Fire and destruction raining everywhere. It was hard for them to see where their friends or other allies were. Zenitsu was trapped on the rubble. Inosuke had been stabbed through the chest. Tengen, attempting to shield his wives, had also been harmed as well, and had even lost an arm. And as for Nezuko, she lay on the ground. However, before she could get back on her feet, Gyutaro would slam her back down once again, his foot on top of her head, as he looked up towards Tanjiro. My. Well, isn't this something, huh? All that power, all that strength, and look at all this destruction. Oh boy. And now look at your poor little sister. She's now under my foot. Go. Now. Oh, you'd like that, wouldn't you? You know something? I don't think she could survive if I destroyed her enough. You and I are alike in a lot of ways. We both wish to protect our family, our sisters. But in the end of the day, the difference between you and I is that I'll do anything. There's nothing that's beneath me. Whereas you demon slayers, well, you guys always have your stupid morals. And that's all well and good. But look around. Your friends and comrades lay dying, and you're willing to sacrifice all of them just to save your sister. What do you want? Your sword. Stab your sword in the ground and walk away. And as for that little power of yours, I want you to turn it off. And if you even think about cutting it back on, she dies. Not having any choice, Tanjiro would do as instructed. The symbiote would resuscitate from his skin, exposing him and now leaving him defenseless. Tanjiro would take his sword and stab it into the ground before walking away. Gyutaro would then instruct Daki to bring him the blade, and she did so happily. Tanjiro did nothing as the sister took his sword and brought it to her brother, the brother taking the blade and admiring it. The black-bladed Nichiren's sword, the one surefire way to kill a demon. He took the blade and he tapped it toward Nezuko's neck. It caused Tanjiro's skin to crawl. Right now, the only thing that he knew in his mind was absolute hatred. When it came to his sister, when it came to his family, that was the one thing that struck a chord within Tanjiro, that truly allowed for his inner and most darkest of emotions to emerge. The feeling of losing his family once was already a pain that he would have to live with. However, now, the idea of his sister being threatened by his own weapon, that was something he considered unforgivable. However, Gyutaro would be in for a shock himself. As his hand gripped the hilt of the black blade, he would give Tanjiro a choice: to either become a demon like them and serve under their master Muzan, or he would have to watch his sister die by his own blade. Tanjiro said nothing. He simply stood there in silence. Gyutaro believing that now Tanjiro was going to be selfish and do what he expected all humans to do. He raised the blade high above his head, preparing to bring it down. However, the moment he did so, instantly, black tendrils would shoot from under the ground itself, stabbing him from multiple areas, causing him to stand in place. That moment was all that they needed. Nezuko now unleashing her true strength, as a flower pattern would appear onto her skin, and a strong aura would form around her. She would move from under his foot and kick his legs clean off, while Tanjiro, now being encased in the symbiote once again, would come rushing towards him. Seeing this, Daki would attempt to attack the two. However, Nezuko would hit her with a devastating clothesline, slamming her into the ground once more, while Tanjiro reached and grabbed his blade once again from Gyutaro. as he punched him in the stomach, sending him flying once more. The symbiote tendrils rejoining back with him, revealing that he had sent them underground the moment that he appeared to have let his guard down in the first place. Just as it seemed as though the two brother and sister demon duo were about to regroup and send their next attack, from out of nowhere, from under the rubble, Zenitsu would come flying, before Daki could have a chance to attack at Nezuko. He would jump, using and unleashing his true attack, that being Godspeed. He would go using his momentum to cut off the neck of Daki, unaware that Nezuko had actually clung on to him. Using her strength, she grabbed the hilt of the blade, hoping to amplify their power together, giving them the strength that they would need to take her head clean off. While Tanjiro turned back to face against Gyutaro, knowing that now was the time to bring this fight to an end. From under the rubble, Tengen would stand by him as well. However, he wasn't in a good state at all. Tengen held his hand, the one that had been cut off. Venom would tell Tanjiro to touch Tengen's shoulder, and he would do so. A little bit of the symbiote would crawl onto Tengen's body, grabbing where his arm stub was and where his arm used to be. The symbiote would work reattaching the two ligaments together, leaving Tengen with a symbiote hand. It would have to stay that way for some time until it completely healed, but for now, it would work better than anything. Tanjiro would take a deep breath, Tengen stating that he only had enough strength to help aid Tanjiro, and that they were going to have to launch an all-out assault on Gyutaro once and for all. Tanjiro would take a deep breath, as he was preparing to use his most powerful of breathing techniques. Venom breathing, 5th form, double critical. As Tanjiro took a deep breath, the symbiote would fill inside of his lungs, holding it all in, giving him a brief adrenaline rush. The sensation, Tanjiro could feel it all the way down to his fingertips, all the way to the very fibers of his being. With himself completely focused, he would use the ability of the Hinokami Kagura, launching forward as his blade of flame would go out in a blaze, striking Gyutaro in the neck, with Tengen following close behind. Using his sound breathing technique, understanding the rhythm of Gyutaro's blood slash technique, he would be able to counter and wipe them all away, creating an opening for Tanjiro to strike, with him following close behind. In the meanwhile, Inosuke, having been able to move his organs from within his own body, would have avoided suffering a critical blow to the heart, and now he too was joining the fray. Using his beast breathing, he would battle off the obi slashes coming at both Nezuko and Zenitsu, as the three of them would work as well. Everyone combining and using all of their power, they would eventually be able to send the heads of the brother and sister duo rolling. In a single flash of light, both of their heads would fall completely off. And before they knew it, their victory had been secured. Tengen's wives would move over to his side immediately, seeing that his body was still being affected by the poison greatly. They would work to try to treat him as soon as they could. As for Zenitsu and Inosuke, they too fell and collapsed from their injuries. However, thankfully, Nezuko, having had the ability to heal of demon poison, would use her specially made demon flames to help cure all who had been harmed. Of course, Tengen was still in some pain, but all in all, this battle could have turned out a whole lot worse. In the meanwhile, Tanjiro simply sat with the two heads of the brother and sister duo. As he sat with the two of them, he would hear their final conversation, the two exchanging rather distasting comments towards one another. The way that they were arguing, the way that they were fighting, that wasn't how a brother and sister were supposed to act. Despite everything they had been through, they always had each other. And he rebuked the both of them, stating that in the end, they couldn't have that type of hatred towards one another. They were supposed to love each other. It was at that moment that the two of them reflected on the lives that they had lived. Lives that were in poverty. The things that they had both endured. Ultimately, they knew that they only had each other. It was the only way they could have survived for as long as they had. In the end, the only thing Daki wanted was for her brother to save her. And Gyataro, the only thing he wanted was to be there for his sister. As the two shared in tears and in sorrow, from out of nowhere, two red tendrils would emerge, stabbing both of them in the forehead and recoiling them back to its original source. The last thing Tanjiro would hear would be blood-curdling screams, the sound of bones crunching, before eventually an objective silence. As Tanjiro looked up, he saw a monstrous figure, one that he couldn't possibly comprehend. And as for Venom, he saw the one thing he thought he would never see again: a second symbiote.
A red one? What the hell is a red one doing here?
A red one? Venom, I thought you were the only symbiote on Earth.
That's what I thought as well, but it seems as though this is not the case. I couldn't even sense its presence.
Father, it is so nice to see you again.
I'm your father?
Oh yes, I was made from you. We met long ago. That was when Tanjiro would remember the crazed prisoner that bit him while he was in the city, looking for Muzan. He didn't think anything of it. That was until Venom explained that when he ingested some of his blood, some of the symbiote was within it. It caused itself to imprint upon him and create a new one from scratch, a red symbiote.
And just who the hell are you?
We are Carnage. Why? Why did you do that to them? They were already going to die. There was no need to give them such a horrifying death. My plans will be revealed in due time. Because you have given me this life, I will spare you for now. But know that when our paths cross again, I don't intend to hold back. You work for Muzan, don't you?
Work with?
I believe you're confused. Muzan Kibutsuji is a relic of the past. He acts strong, but he is in fact weak. He is primitive. For you see, unlike
that pitiful Muzan.
As he continued to speak, the red symbiote would disappear, revealing a man in a blood-red suit and a red hat. His left eye with the number 4 in crimson red. He was one of the 12 Kizuki. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was the fact that the sun was rising behind him, and he wasn't disappearing. For Tanjiro, and for all demon slayers, their worst fears had been realized. A demon that did not have to hide in the dead of night. A demon that did not have to hide in the darkness. This demon not only possessed a symbiote, but he was also a daywalker. Tanjiro wanted to fight. He wanted to do something, anything, but before he could, Venom would stop him, warning him that now wasn't the time. The man simply smiled and laughed as he walked off, waving goodbye, hoping that they would meet again soon. As he disappeared into the fire and destruction, heading deep into the darkness as the sun began to rise once more. Tanjiro would make his way to the others, Nezuko having healed them all. Tengen would ask what he was supposed to do. Venom explained that the symbiote was simply helping to reattach his ligaments, and that his hand would be his once more in due time. Tengen was grateful for the assistance, and he thanked Tanjiro for saving his wives, as well as helping to defeat the demon. Now, it seemed as though the fight in the entertainment district had come to a close, and there were still many more dangers waiting in this world. Many more threats that they would have to face. For Tanjiro, whoever this carnage was, he was their biggest threat yet, and not one that they should take lightly. But for now, Tanjiro only focused on the positives. His friends were safe. They had managed to defeat a great foe, and they were one step closer to their goal. Even with these setbacks, Tanjiro could only look to the future, knowing fully well that he and his friends had survived one of their greatest battles, and they would use these lessons to carry them forward into the future. About 2 months would pass. Tanjiro would be sitting in a local ramen shop in a nearby town. He was on his way back to the Butterfly Mansion after having gone on a solo mission, along with Nezuko. Zenitsu and Inosuke were off doing their own missions as well, but this was around the time they were all supposed to meet back once again. As they had done so, Tanjiro had stopped in to the ramen shop because both he and Venom were rather hungry, and Venom wanted a nice bowl of roasted duck ramen. Of course, Tanjiro never complained about eating duck, but after a while it was starting to become a bit too much for him. However, Venom made it very clear that when it came to him and his duck, he would not be dissuaded in any way, shape, or form. And if Tanjiro had a problem with it, well, he could kick rocks. Ultimately, Tanjiro knew better than to try to argue, and roasted duck didn't sound too bad. As they stopped in the restaurant, they would order a bowl. However, there was some commotion going on beside them. It was a group of guys all sitting at a table. They were trying to remain inconspicuous somehow, yet they seemed to be arguing about something. They were all dressed in traditional garb, but they didn't look as though they were from this place at all. In fact, they looked kinda weird. There was a boy with white hair and red eyes, a boy with green hair and green eyes, a boy with blonde hair and whiskers. There were two other boys, one with short brown hair and the other one with long brown hair. One looked as though he were from Japan, but the other one looked as though he were from the Americas. And then there was an older man sitting amongst them with long black hair. As they were eating their meal, the boy with blonde hair would say that this ramen didn't taste anything like Ichiraku's. The others explaining that they had never actually had Ichiraku ramen. Well, except for one, the boy with the long brown hair. He explained that they had Ichiraku ramen, although he had no idea if it were any good or not. Tanjiro had no real way of knowing who they were or where they came from, but they were a colorful bunch to say the least. As he continued eating, the older man would move from his table as the others looked and asked if he was the one, to which the man simply smiled, giving them the notion that that was indeed the person they had come to find. The older man sat down at the seat beside Tanjiro. Tanjiro and Venom both became a bit nervous, but for Venom, he was more concerned about the boy with the short brown hair, because if he didn't know any better, he could have sworn that was someone that he knew. You're Tanjiro Kamado, I assume, right? Yes, that's me. How do you know my name? I know a lot about you, Tanjiro. Me and my friends here, we've actually been waiting...
Parker!
Huh? The boy with the short brown hair at the table would look up, realizing that his name had been called. But it wasn't by Tanjiro, or by the older man with the dark black hair. Instead, a dark black substance would appear from Tanjiro's shoulder, Venom creating its face as he looked directly towards the boy he had called out.
Peter Parker.
How do you know my name?
You and I, we go way back.
I don't know who you are. Tanjiro would quickly rush outside, the others joining. Tanjiro had his hand on his sword, not sure of what to happen. The others looked on and tried to assure him that they didn't come for a fight, they had actually come for his help. But there was the first matter. How did they know each other? Well, Venom and Peter, I mean. Venom would then tell everyone to shut up, as he had to explain. You see, symbiotes have a hive mind. A hive mind that isn't just contained to their own universe. No, they have a hive mind that stretches across the multiverse itself. Meaning that there were Venoms in other dimensions. Venoms that had met Peter Parker. This left Tanjiro curious. If that were the case, then was this a Peter Parker from their world or from another world? And if it was from another world, then where did all of these guys come from? The older man would step forward amongst them all. I do apologize, Tanjiro. I didn't think that our meeting would be like this. However, you are someone we have been looking for. My name is Loki, and my counterparts here, they are all heroes from another world. This is Peter Parker from Lagunica, the Spider-Man. This is Issei Hyodo, the Ghost Rider. I'm Izuku Midoriya, Uh, I'm Iron Man. I'm Bel Cornell. I'm, Thor, pretty much. Or at least, I'm the next wielder of the power of Thor. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, Sorcerer Supreme. Okay. Before Tanjiro could say another word, all of the boys that had introduced themselves revealed their true forms. Bel took out Mjolnir and revealed his armored state. Deku transformed into Iron Man. Naruto turned into his traditional ninja garb, along with his red cloak. Peter Parker donned his Spider-Man gear. It was the gear that he had worn in Spider-Man Homecoming, the traditional suit that he had before he had gotten his new one by Mr. Stark. It was the suit that he had worn when he had been sent to the ReZero world, the one that he liked the most and the one that worked best for him. And as for Issei, he transformed into his black jeans and black leather jacket, and his face turned into that of a flaming skull. Tanjiro and Venom couldn't believe what they were seeing. All of these extraordinary people, not knowing that they had all come from different worlds and different realities. And among them, the one known as Loki would transform into his traditional TVA attire. Tanjiro Kamado. The multiverse needs your help. I'm putting together a team of special individuals with abilities to aid me in my fight. There is a threat that could shape the very fabric of reality, and your power could be the difference maker. Tanjiro had a lot to take in. Of course, he was always raised to do the right thing, so that wasn't really the issue here. It was the fact that they were talking about traveling to different worlds, dimensions. He was still a demon slayer, and this world still needed his help. He couldn't just afford to leave. There was Carnage, Muzan, and all the other threats. However, Loki would explain that as long as their mission was successful, then when it was all said and done, everyone would return home. They would return to the point in time in which they left in the first place, meaning that the moment that they leave and the moment that they return, no time would have passed at all. Of course, that's assuming that they all returned back alive. Now, Tanjiro had to think, what was he going to do? Was he going to join this band of heroes on some epic quest? Of course, before he had a chance to finish answering, Venom was more than ready to take them up on the idea. Tanjiro wasn't entirely enthusiastic about this. However, Venom would explain that this was their chance to get stronger. There were going to be powerful foes that they would have to face along the way. And as a result, there was no telling what type of adventures they could get into. After all, this was the multiverse. This meant that Venom could potentially see other versions of himself. They could learn new and better ways of improving in their techniques. This was more of an experience than they could ever get by just staying here. That sounded reasonable, and Tanjiro seemed convinced enough to go along. However, there was his sister Nezuko. The sun was out currently, so she was asleep in her box, but he couldn't leave without her. If he was going to join this team, then she had to come along as well. They all agreed to this, Loki already having a brief idea of what her powers could be. Then she would definitely be included in this fight. With that, Tanjiro would agree, but he made Loki promise that he would be brought back to his world, right back here, at the same time that they left. And Loki promised that he would do everything in his power to bring him back here, once their mission was over. As they shook hands and he held him to his word, Tanjiro would introduce himself to the team. Everyone standing together as Loki took out a device, opening a portal as they entered into the next world. Instantly, the group would find themselves in another part of the world. They were still on Earth, but in another Earth. Peter recognized instantly that they were in New York. However, this was a different kind of New York. As they looked up at the Times Square sign, the date and the year was way off. Because you see, the year of this Earth was 1989. Loki explained that they had come to this universe to pick up the final member of their team. As they were going off in search of their final member, Tanjiro would have to ask, what was this team? Just who the hell were they? Loki and the others turned back with a smile, as Peter looked to him and said, "We're the Avengers, man. Welcome aboard." And with that, the team would make their way through New York in search for their final member, a person that Peter knew all too well. His name was Steve Rogers, aka Captain America. This concludes What If Tanjiro Had Venom? Demon Slayer Dark Fury Season 2 Part 2, the Season 2 finale. As always, if you're a fan of today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting stats to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's slate of videos as we will be doing Konosuba, the Mystic Rangers of Misfortune, Part 6, the Season 2 finale, along with the movie Legend of Crimson. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.